This week's guest on the podcast is the amazing Jade Walker, who is an expert when it comes to endometriosis and fertility. So she has built a team of online naturopaths, and she currently has her own endo program, which is in launch as we are speaking and recording this episode. She has her own podcast, the Jade Walker Way, and she's doing incredible things in the industry. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Jade, and I cannot wait to dive into the evolution of you and your career.
Thank you so much for having me. And, it was actually quite cool hearing you just say all those things, because that's almost been like my little manifestation piece before I launched the course, was all those things that like I'll have eventually one day in my career. And then actually to hear someone now say that out loud, that this is what she's doing, I'm like, oh shit, yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, here you are. You've done it.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on.
You're so welcome. So let's get into it by chatting a little bit about how you got on this trajectory. What inspired you to learn about nutrition and naturopathy and support others on their health journey?
Yeah. So it actually started when I was probably around 21. And like a lot of naturopaths and nutritionists, quite often many of us started our degree vegan or plant-based, and that was me. And
Yeah.
I think I was maybe 19 when I first started my plant-based journey, and I'm not now, but that's what put me onto the path of becoming more aware on what you're eating and things. With that said, at that time, certainly without the qualifications that we have now, I wasn't following it entirely correctly, and I did start to become deficient as a result, but it still made me more aware on health. And I did actually go on a real health journey. Like I went from, in my teenage to late teenage years, I was definitely unhappy and a little bit unhealthy. I mean, I certainly wasn't the unhealthiest, but it could have been a bit better. And then so I would just, always post about my healthy eating and veganism stuff. This is before studying naturopathy. And everyone around me was actually saying, like, why aren't you studying nutrition or something? Like, this is all you ever talk about.
Yeah.
And and my original career was actually a a journalist. So when I was 17, I got a cadetship in journalism and did that for 3.5 years. And then I moved into advertising, then I was going to do real estate. And then it was like, okay, what am I actually doing? Like, what am I really, really passionate about? And I was always really passionate about science because my dad was a science teacher and I get that from him. And I ended up moving from South Australia to Queensland in Townsville, and I wanted to study a Bachelor of Science. So I enrolled and I did that. And I didn't even finish year 12, by the way. Like I had a really rough year 12 and left and then started my cadetship. So I was really lucky in that way. But I was like, I'm not going to be able to start. I'm not going to be able to do uni. Didn't finish year 12, all those doubts that you tell yourself and limitations. And and all of a sudden I just had this whole new mindset and I was like, no, I can actually do whatever I want to do. And I'll find a way. And so I did a tertiary access course, which is like a bridging course. And so I did that and then started Bachelor of Science. And I was thinking either marine biology or zoology. And then I actually got a job at the Happy Herb Shop up in Townsville. It was one of those divine timing things where I got a cold when I first moved to Townsville, even though it's so hot there, but I think it was just from all the changing climate. And I went to the pharmacy, as you do. And, but funnily enough, right next to the pharmacy was a Happy Herb Shop.
Wow.
And I thought, maybe I should just go in there and see if they've got something natural. Like I wasn't even, I never used to take much natural medicine, but it just always was kind of on my mind.
Yeah.
And so I went in there and the owner, she was so lovely. And I got chatting to her and she goes, well, if you're looking for a job, I've actually got a job going.
Amazing.
And I swear to God, that was the turning point as to why I'm a naturopath.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, really? Yeah, I'll go home. I'll get my resume and I'll come back in. And and then so I did a trial and absolutely loved it. And then suddenly I just saw, because even though the Happy Herb Shop was often known as Happy High Herbs for all their natural party highs and stuff, actually the bulk of their store is all herbal medicine. And I started to just notice all these people coming in for all these different ailments, everything from a cold and fertility all the way to cancer. And they were coming in for all these herbs and swearing by them. And I was seeing the changes in them. And these were just based off a basic decoction, like a herbal tea. And
Wow.
I was like, what the hell is going on here? And so I learned more about all these different herbs. And then I became known as, like, amongst all my friends, like the witch doctor, because I started to build out this pantry at home full of different herbal medicines. And whenever someone was sick, I was like, try this, take that, got
Yeah.
really obsessed. And then, and then when I was almost 22, I met my ex-husband, and he was like, you should be studying naturopathy or something. And I was like, no, I've started this other degree now. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And then I volunteered overseas in Cambodia, and I just had a life-changing moment one day, and I was thinking, hang on a sec, like, we are so privileged in our country, like, especially, I was volunteering at this self-help school and all the things, all the stories. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm telling myself it's too late. Like, come on. And then so I came back, unenrolled in that, and then enrolled in a Bachelor of Health Science in naturopathy, and never looked back. And now here I am.
Incredible. What a story. I love that. I love, the whole like witch doctor vibe and like getting to know the herbs through that role. And so divine that all unfolded the way it did. And then when you studied, where did you go from there?
Yeah. So at the time I was still in Townsville, and I started studying like remotely with as much as I could. And then, because my ex was planning to move down to Victoria already. And that was also the final piece of me deciding to move with him too, because I was like, I don't want to move to Victoria. It's too cold.
Yeah.
I moved up to Queensland for a reason. Anyway, but that all worked out well. And so moved down, and and then I studied full time, did the whole 4 years, and throughout that, had it start a little tea business like many of us often do, and actually, started to do quite well with that. And I was always just doing lots of bits and pieces as well. Like, I even somehow landed this amazing recipe writing job for this big company. And and I think I always knew that I wanted to do something big and meaningful out of it.
Yeah.
But it definitely evolved too, because when I so many people in the degree were always like, I want to specialize in women's health. And, that's kind of like 50% of the population kind of thing. And I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else then, if everyone else is going to do that, And so I actually didn't start off like thinking I'd specialize in reproductive. But then of course it's through your own journey, isn't it, that you often end up like focusing on a certain area. And I also say to people now, especially from a mentoring perspective, is like, don't ever worry about how many other people are doing something, because you're going to do it in your own unique way. And and especially the best thing anyone can do is to share their story and be vulnerable and share every little detail, because there will be other people going through that as well. So when I graduated, I started working for a multimodality clinic in Melbourne, and that was great because I got so much experience, and there was a GP there as well, and all sorts of different practitioners, and that really helped excel my knowledge very quickly as well. But at the same time, underneath all of that, I was actually going through my own debilitating period pain and my own undiagnosed endo journey. And I honestly had hoped that I would find all the answers in my degree for my pain, because I had already had a laparoscopy when I was 21, and they said there was no endo, everything looked fine. And that's often one of the big stories that I tell everyone about my endo journey, and why I got passionate about it, because we know that not every surgeon is qualified in endo, and not all endo is very visible. And I had been to naturopaths myself, both through my degree and post-graduation, and no one like could really help what I was going through. And then and it wasn't until 3 years ago I finally got diagnosed and had the surgery, and the rest was history.
It's so amazing when like we also, even though the hardship of having to go through it, but then having that story and having that extra drive to be able to support others and be able to relate, like you said, sharing your journey. Like that's something I really loved watching along the way, and just how real and raw and vulnerable you were the whole way through it. And so many people would have got such a gift from that, being like, wow, okay, this could be what's going on for me as well. Or wow, like look at Jade sharing all of this like wisdom and knowledge. And even when you're in the thick of it, like it's such a gift. And then it gives you that like relatability, that experience, and like, yeah, rather than just being like, okay, I'm going to specialize in this thing that I've never experienced before, which is fine too. And that's an okay path to go down too. But like, yeah, it's been so cool seeing the evolution of your business as you've been through your own journey, and how you're really supporting people and help taking away a lot of the hardship of the journey and being there to hold their hand. So yeah, really incredible what you're doing.
Thank you. You know, it's, even though like a lot of people say to me, I wish I had the confidence to you, and like I really admire that you just can like be so vulnerable. And I'm like, do you know what though? Every time I do that, I freak out and I just want to delete it all. Like every time I get massive imposter syndrome, and I actually have gone through phases where I like all of a sudden just don't hardly post it all for months because I just get in my head again, and I'm just like, oh my God, I share way too much. People don't need to know every part of this in my life, you know. And even to be honest with you, my ex like used to feel a bit uncomfortable with some of the things that like I shared, and yeah, so it was really hard. I was always in like two minds and stuff, but now, and especially being single now, I can just do whatever I want. I mean, everyone should be able to do whatever they want, but you know what I mean? And now I just feel really liberated, and I'm like, you know what? People need to hear this message. People are sick of the surface level stuff. Like, there are a million of us out there telling everyone about, oh, have more vitamin C, eat more fiber. No one gives a shit anymore. Everyone knows that. Like, let's tell people the real deep shit, and let's be honest as well, because like, you know, there's also a bit of a facade in our profession that if you're a naturopath, you must be perfect and be like totally gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, alcohol-free, like everything free. And you only do this and that. Always do cold ice baths and meditation. Like, no, like I wish I could be that, you know, committed. So I'm always trying to be really honest with people, and say, look, even though I know these things are going to get you results, I know that it's not easy, and I can vouch for that, you know? So yeah, that's what I'm always trying to tell other practitioners when they graduate, and because, you know, I often mentor other graduates, and I'm just always like, just show up and be different and just be yourself.
Yes.
No one else is you.
Yeah. It's such a big point of difference. And like anytime someone says the market's saturated, I'm like, yeah, but nobody is you. Like that's something that cannot be replicated.
Like I even think this is a funny analogy to use, but like single people will relate. I actually think about, remember when Tinder came out, and Tinder was the only dating app, and it was just so groundbreaking, right? Yeah. And now 10 years on, Tinder is kind of like, it's nowhere near as good as say Hinge. Like, you know, Hinge came out and changed, you know, kind of made it a little bit different. And so did Bumble. And like Bumble came from the angle of being more feminine, you know, female powered, and they give the female the power to start the conversation first, you know, like everyone can end up coming and recreating the wheel and actually doing something different. Like, why not be that person? Like, you know, be the new Hinge.
Yes, I love that. That's so true. And speaking of like those times where you felt like you wanted to delete things, or you felt like you were sharing too much, or the imposter syndrome was coming up, what did you do to kind of move through that for anyone listening that might be in those kind of situations where they're like, oh, I don't want to share because they're feeling afraid, or that it's like feeling that vulnerability hangover? What are some of the things that have supported you in your journey?
Oh, so many different aspects, to be honest. And it was very reflective of different elements of things that I was going through, whether it was issues in my relationship, issues with, you know, when I was even going through my fertility journey. And what it always comes back down to is there are always these voices in your head that are only the 1%ers that you shouldn't even be trying to please anyway. It's always like John on Facebook from 2005 that said that one negative comment to you and it's never left your head, you know, or like Auntie Flo who always has something to say, you know, like there's always those one or two people that have somehow put this little thing in your head that doesn't go away. And that is definitely an issue that I had. And I did have to work through my psychologist, and I still do. Like whenever sometimes imposter syndrome comes up, even with the endo course, because I started writing that 3 years ago, and I hoped to have it finished by the time my girls were born, but rocky pregnancy, born at 33 weeks, it was hard, and then twins, breastfeeding, sleep deprivation, divorce. Why not throw that in there as well while we're at it? So it was a tough time, but at the same time, I kept saying, all right, no, I need to get this course done. I really want to get it done, and it's going to help to support me with more passive income so that I can also be a mum more and like do all those things too. And every time I'd go to sit down to do it, I'm like, no, you're not good enough. No, you don't know enough. There's practitioners out there that know way more than you. Like, who do you think you are? Like, you haven't even been practicing that long. Like, just all these things. And then, you've been out of practice for 2 years. So there's probably so much that you don't know. So you're going to have to go back to all and read all the research again. Like, it just, and I literally had to work through those things with my psychologist.
Yeah.
But what it also came down to, though, was I think personally, it was also a reflection that it wasn't the right time, because I was still like in the throes of newborn stage, and I was trying to bloody be an entrepreneur at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing. It's like, yes, obviously, like I still want people to find the determination, motivation, and drive to be a great business owner. But at the same time, remember, if you're in a really hard place, especially if you're a new mum, for God's sake, like people put so much pressure on themselves to get back to work way too quickly. And I really wish that there was better support as well. Like, we just don't have enough support, and then we feel pressured to go back to work so quickly.
Yeah.
But we think that time is running out, but no, like a couple of years is not going to affect you having a successful career. So it's a mixture of like, allow yourself the space and time that you need to work through stuff. But also, if you are going through that imposter syndrome, honestly, the best thing you probably can do is to speak to some sort of counselor, psychologist, do trauma work, whatever it is. And that are all things that I've also been doing. I've done trauma healing recently. I did this thing called New Calm the other day, which was crazy and really cool as well. Like I've really got in touch with my spiritual side. Like, because when I first started my degree, I came with such an evidence-based mindset, and obviously we are still evidence-based, not doubting that, but also I was a bit still closed-minded to some things too. And I was only starting to realize, what does spirituality mean, And yeah, so to be honest, that's really helped me as well, is just to get in touch with that spiritual side and actually have certain spiritual practices. And even some people may know this, that earlier this year I was finally diagnosed with ADHD as well. And ADHD is a classic for imposter syndrome, because our brains are so much more overactive, and we think way more, and we just like overthink things. And so even having that diagnosis was so validating, because it answered so many issues that I've had my whole life, and why I've doubted myself in so many things, but still been able to have this incredible amount of motivation sometimes, And it's weird, because ADHD is definitely this weird devil angel situation where you have so many weird like contrasts on your personality and what you can and can't do, and you battle with yourself in your mind all the time on it. So yeah, like as the most long-winded way to answer your question, it's complex, but I really, really do think probably the main two things is, one, tell everyone in your head to shut up, because they don't matter. Because that you're never going to please them. And I can tell you right now, even if you do show up and you start being successful, and even if you say became a millionaire, whatever, they will still have something negative to say. So just don't even worry about them. Worry about those people whose lives you are going to change. And the thing that always gets me to show up, I appreciate it. I always reply to every single person that sends me a nice message, because it really does help me so much. Like when I get those beautiful messages every week, just like, hey Jade, you probably don't know me, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for everything you share. It's helped me so much. Like even the amount of people that say they got their endo diagnosis because of my story, or they wound up in the right hands with the right endo surgeon because of what I share, and all those kinds of things. And that just like, that is the pinnacle of what we do.
Yeah, that's huge. And I love that, like reminding yourself the people that you are helping rather than those that are always going to have something negative to say. Yeah, really
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And I love that you've touched on like the mindset work, the trauma work. Like I'm so big on like the mindset, embodiment, somatic. Like it makes such a difference in how we can show up, and even that self-awareness and understanding those patterns so we don't fall into the traps, and working with the subconscious to really support ourselves and make things easier for ourselves. So yeah, well done for doing that work, because it's not easy, especially like the psychology appointments and even these other ones that you've been trying. Like it can feel uncomfortable, but so worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It feels uncomfortable. It is. There's so much discomfort, and honestly, it all ties back to some sort of little micro traumas along the way as well.
Yeah.
It's all these little things, these little seeds of doubt that have been planted in your head throughout your life.
Yeah.
And they are embedded into your nervous system, and you have to release them, and you've got to do the work to get it out. And it does feel uncomfortable. Even making the appointment with someone to help you is uncomfortable, like all those kinds of things. But if you can do it, like just take that step, just do it, just push yourself. And I can tell you your life will change. And suddenly you'll just start showing up and just being like, I don't give an F anymore.
Yeah.
You can think what you want about me. Like,
yeah. Amazing. So let's chat a little bit more about your evolution and things. The tea, it kind of started with the tea, and I remember the days watching you package up your teas and things. Do you still have your teas available, or are they something that you've phased out?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I've still got, like in the other room, still have bulk herb that like basically like halfway through the pregnancy, it just came to a halt. And then a couple of times I did like a little warehouse sale, tried to push some more. But yeah, it just, as a lot of people that start tea businesses often do find, like once you start consulting and that, unless you bring on a team to do it, which I did consider at one point, but because I do it from home, then people would have to be in my house, like, and it wasn't something I was prepared to go and get a warehouse for, it wasn't part of my vision anymore. So I do still have heaps of herbs, and I've actually got a few people who want to buy it all off me. And even just that seems like a mammoth task, having to weigh it all and figure out the price. And and it's a shame because like I, at one point I had quite a few stockists, and it was like really starting to take off, and I invested so much time, energy and money into like all these new labels, and I've still got like 1,000 of these custom printed, like of my Cleanse Me and the Masala Chai bags, like that I ordered once. And I even, at one point I was making actual tea bags and literally heat sealing every single one of them myself. Because I had a couple of suppliers that like, they were like tea and coffee vans. And I was in that people pleasing phase where I never wanted to say no to anyone. And I ended up like spending more on getting all these things made than I ever made back from that process. But you know what, you learn. So
it's all part of the journey.
Yeah,
cool. So you started more focusing on consulting and supporting people in that one-on-one capacity?
Yeah, exactly. So when it was probably, what was it now? I think it was like 2 years in when I, just went off on my own. And actually a lot of people don't know that after, I think it was about 2 years as well, I actually started a completely different unrelated job as a 000 call taker for what's called Esther, because at the time my ex and I, we really wanted to buy a house, and everyone knows like when you have a business, like it's very hard to buy a house with that income when you've only just started out and you're hardly making anything. And anyway, and so long story short, I became a 000 call taker out of all things. And at first, to be honest, it felt like such a failure. I was like, I can't believe I'm now working in this job, like when I just started a business, and like, what the hell is going on? Like, it was very weird, surreal feeling. But it was actually, I really enjoyed it, and it did exactly what I intended, was to get some secure income and be able to get a house. So we bought a house, did all the
Yeah.
things. And then, but that feeling started to sink in again. I was like, no, I want to be doing more. I want to have my own business. I want to go all in. I just need to take the leap. But like my ex was very much like, well, once your business is making this much, then you can leave the job. I'm like, well, how can I make my business make that much if I'm working at this other job and giving all my energy to it?
Yeah.
And so it did take that massive leap eventually. And there was just this one night I could not sleep, and I had to get out of bed and make a pros and cons list.
Yeah.
And I was like also really nervous about what my ex was going to say, because like he was very like militant and just had a lot of opinions on certain things, and I always felt like I was never going to be able to please him, and all these things. And anyway, and so the next morning I was so nervous, my heart was pounding, and I just went up to him with so much conviction. I said, I've decided to leave that job and I'm going to go all in with my business, and here's why. I like showed him the pros and cons, and he was just like, come here, give me a hug, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, oh my God, such a relief. And then I did it. And so from that point, I was probably 5 months into the financial year. And then I went all in with my business. And in that financial year, I made just over $100,000.
Incredible.
And I was just like, what the hell? Like that isn't even my best work yet. Like,
Yeah.
And so it was like such a good feeling, and it was like the best thing I did. So like whenever I see people always on that fence and they're like, oh, I need to jump, but I can't. Oh, there's all these things. I'm like, fucking do it seriously. It'll be the best thing that you do. And with that said, I then had to take another back step because again, like, endo, then IVF, then hard pregnancy, then having twins, and all those things. So naturally, like I could barely work for a bit, and literally like, so truly in the last year I've had to slowly be building my business back up. So, and also again, becoming a single mom. And then when we first separated, and I wasn't consulting, and or I was trying, but I barely had any time to do it, and I had staff that was working for me, and like I actually was at a point where I had no money. I was just like, fuck, like this is stressful. Like, I actually had to one day, and when there was this huge blow up with my ex, because we were still living together, and it was so toxic and so volatile. And then, I ended up like moving out with some random person, and then had to move back because that didn't work out. And it was just like a really, really hard time. And because my ex and I were just in like not a good place and arguing, like I had no money. Like I literally had no money left. And I had to call Centrelink, bawling my eyes out, and just like, I'm in a really hard place here. Like, and because you can get single parent payment, but you like it can take a long time to come through, but like they had to try and like fast track it because I was literally in like a really vulnerable state. So, but all of that motivated me to be like, I want to be able to give, I don't want to have to depend on someone to give my girls a great life. Like I know how to run a business. I know how to run a successful business. I can do this, but I also had to just give myself a bit of grace and be like, it's not going to happen overnight, and that's okay. Like, remember what you've been through. Like, don't expect miracles right now. And then, so the next thing was to move on to the endo course. And so I was consulting like at the start of this year, and, I was building that practice back up, and, very quickly there's always people waiting for you to get back to work after maternity leave and all that. So that was never an issue. But I was also really realizing, like, do I actually want to just do one-on-one consulting for the rest of my life? I really want to be able to help people on a bigger scale. And I wanted to revisit the endo course, or the Endo Care Collective. And I reached out to a friend. She's also a graduate naturopath, but she specialises now in course creation for other practitioners. And so I reached out to Steph. She was actually my original VA, and she actually started helping me put the slides together 3 years ago for the endo course. Before she like got into Kajabi stuff. And anyway, and I reached out to her this year. Funnily enough, so this is showing my spiritual side again. I did this big tarot spread for myself. And I wanted to do a business spread. And this is when I was just getting into tarot. Like after my separation, I was like, I really just felt this, felt compelled to be drawn to, more spiritual side, because it was very suppressed in my relationship. And so I was like, I'm just going to dabble with tarot cards. And like at the time I was like, I don't even know if I believe in it, but it'll be fun. Let's just do it,
Yeah.
And oh my God, like the stuff that came up, and I was like, you know what, even if this is just a fluke that I pulled these cards, I'm going to follow this advice. And one of the cards was like, talking about, okay, so it said, what you're doing right now is no longer working and you need to change. And for me, I had that feeling already. I was like, showing up for one-on-one consults every week is draining me to death.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. I can't do this, especially on top of being a single mum.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's got to be the course. I've got to revisit it. And one of the cards, so like, if anyone knows about tarot, that some of the suits of the tarot are associated with different signs, like earth signs, fire signs, all these things. And one of them was saying, focus on these signs as a possible mentor who's going to help you get there. And I look it up, and I thought, I wonder if Steph is one of these 3 signs, because I knew Steph was going to help me, and she was a Virgo.
Yeah.
And I actually went on her Facebook, looked at her date of birth, tried to figure it out. I was like, yes, she is. Oh my God, no, it's got to be her. And so I reached out to her and I was like, Steph, are you still keen to help me with my course? She's like, yeah, definitely. And then it was still a bit of a slow start in the beginning. And then eventually she brought on a whole team from Evolve Virtually and Blog Society. So Ash and Jacqueline. And so next thing, I've got someone building my course, a launch strategist, full on, did everything. And because my ex and I sold our house, I had some money there, and I was like, what can I invest in? That's something I want to actually invest my money in. And then, so literally not even a week ago, we finally launched it. So
incredible.
After all of those massive journeys and so many incredible lows, I'm talking to the absolute darkest places of my life, lows, to now being on such a high and just be like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. I'm so happy with my life right now.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, it's really inspiring to see that even through all those lows and everything, you've remained so optimistic, and you've remained so in alignment with your vision, and be like, no, I'm going to make this happen. I want to create a great life for my daughters. That's so beautiful. And I can see why you have been so successful, because you have that real determination and consistency to keep showing up, even in the times where you have to take that step back because you're a new mum or you've got things going crazy in your life behind the scenes. You still come back from it. Incredible.
No, for some reason I definitely have always had this this drive for things in life, and that's an ADHD trait actually. You get hyper fixated. You can get really super passionate about things. And, again, with the imposter syndrome, even when I started getting Steph and the team to work on it, I was like, oh, have I made the right decision? Should I really do this? And there would be times when I'd almost tell myself maybe I shouldn't have done it in endo, but maybe people don't even care anymore about what I've got to say on endo. It's just you go through. And so I'm just saying these things because I know anyone else listening to this, if you go through, say, course creation or a massive project, there's this really good book actually called The Giant Leap, and I highly recommend people read it. Have you read it?
I love that book. Yeah,
so good. That was probably very integral for me to help me get over these things too, because as you know, he refers to the upper limiting problem, where every time you go to take a quantum leap with something, the universe just sends you every fucking shit show possible to try and tell you that you're not good enough and you're not going to be able to do it. And right down to the point that your body starts manifesting health conditions because you don't want to do it. And totally that happened with me as well. Right when it was finally getting to that last pointy end before launch, and I still had so much to do, and I started getting really run down, and I thought I was going to lose my voice, and all these things. It's oh my God, this is happening. And it felt so uncomfortable. And I was like, because I was in such a state of comfort of knowing that it wasn't done. Like, but once it was going to be done, I was like, oh shit, I've actually got to commit to this now.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but I think once you do it once, then every other time will be so much easier. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do anything now.
Yeah, amazing. And how have you found building back up while having to raise like two beautiful daughters and twins? Like that's obviously a full-time job or more on its own. How do you go with balancing that with having the time to create your program, to consult, and anything else that's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's a great question, because in the beginning it was really hard, and it was also like evident by the fact that like my business wasn't really making anything, even though I had like, you know, my 3 naturopaths, and because I pay my naturopaths really well, like I give them a really high cut, because I really strongly believe that too many people are graduating getting ripped off, like, you know, and I think we should all be valued. So I give them a really good cut, but then I also, you know, have my assistant that I was paying on top of that. And then, you know, all the other things, expenses and things I was investing in. So like my business wasn't making any money. And I was just like, oh, what am I doing? Like, is this even worth it? Like, you know, and it was really hard. And then, I didn't have the time, because the girls are at daycare 3 days a week. But, you know, even in that time, you still got to do the groceries and like clean the house and all the other life admin stuff on top of your business. So I was never really left with much time. But with that said, one of the little silver linings of becoming a single parent, depending on your arrangement with your ex-partner, because not everyone does have a good arrangement, and I know that, but for a lot of people will tell you, is it's actually nice that you get a break when they're at their dad's.
Yeah.
And so that for me, to be honest with you, like now I genuinely find my life is easy is not the right word, because you pick your hard, you pick your easies and your battles and stuff, but it feels pretty manageable. Like I think a lot of people think, I don't know how you were doing it. You've got this business, you just launched a course, you're a single mum, but I still have a lot of flexibility. Like I have the ability to just book a podcast in with you today, you know, you know, I can still book in time for me, like on Friday when I had injectable NAD, like on Friday, and went on a date, you know.
Awesome.
So like, yeah, actually, and that was something else I did find though, is especially when you're single, there are some big distractions that can occur from your business, and you do have to pick, you have to kind of start to prioritize. And I did notice, so when I first, not quite when I was first, but, you know, eventually at some point when I was settling into being single, I was like, oh, exciting, I can go on dates now.
Yeah.
And that was really taking away from my business, because not only was I like on those few days here and there where I don't have the girls, I was prioritizing to go on dates. And then that was kind of draining as well. And then trying to, you know, like at one point I did, you know, start to get into like a little bit of a relationship with someone at the start of this year, and we're still friends, you know, it didn't work out, but I just all of a sudden, he was like my number one priority, and I just like put everything off the table again with my business. And I realized, I was like, hang on a sec, like you can still have a relationship, but like it helped me to realize, okay, I still need to have some good boundaries, and I still need to like prioritize what's important. So like for the last 4 months when I was just in lockdown on like my core stuff, I banned myself from dating. I was just like, nah, I have to focus. I cannot get distracted. And I also wanted to work on myself, and I did. And I'm like, I actually feel like a totally different person to where I was 6 months ago already.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think that's such a great point, because we can often get into business and not treat our business like a business. It's like, cool, I've got all this flexibility and freedom, forgetting that in its infancy, it's like a child. It needs way more attention than it will down the track if we design it that way anyway. But yeah, it's kind of like it needs that time, it needs that consistency, it needs that attention. So yeah, it's cool how you came around to that like realization, and now you have those boundaries, and you'll find a great balance. And love that you're back in the dating world. That's exciting too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like it is exactly like a little child. And I think where it's also getting easier too is that the girls are becoming easier. So like, obviously, so like, you know, every Tuesday and Thursday, obviously they're home with me, unless they're at their dad's every second week they'll be there on the Thursday, but I always have them every Tuesday all day.
Yep.
And then like every second weekend, I also have them all weekend. And yeah, it's not like I'm just like, all right, girls, I'm just going to do some videoing now. Like, you know, cause they're two, you know?
Yeah.
But like what I do find now is like, especially it's so beautiful having twins because they can play together.
Yeah.
And so quite often, like if I do notice they are just really happy playing with themselves for a bit, I'm like, all right, maybe I can just get a few things done. So yeah, you find ways in and out of it all. And then some weeks go to shit, but then other weeks you're like, wow, this feels so easy this week. I can do it, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Like really finding the time and the little points where you can tick a few things off. It all makes a difference. It all adds up. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like that Parkinson's law as well, isn't it? Like things expand and take as long as you give them time to. So it's like if we give ourselves like all this time, then we're way less efficient because we're like, yeah, I've got the whole day to do this task. Whereas if we're like, I've only got 30 minutes today, I've got to go pick the girls up or something, then it's like, you're pretty much going to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that is that's an ADHD thing too, where we're just such last minute people.
Yeah. Need that deadline.
Absolutely. And that was another reason why I had to bring on a team, because I was never going to do it because I just had exponent, you know, always just had too much time to do it. But tell myself I had no time, you know? So yeah, having them on my back, I even said to like Jacqueline had this intake form I had to fill out before I started working with her. And it said like, you know, what's the one thing that you think is going to get in the way of you doing this? And I'm like, not having strict deadlines.
Yeah.
like if you just say, oh, I've still got 4 months, that'll be fine. Then it won't happen till 4 months time.
Yeah, smart. And it's great that you knew yourself enough to know what you needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. And if you were to give past Jade when you're graduating a piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh God, that's a tough one. Cause like there are two parts of me. One is like, just keep doing what you're going to do, what you're doing, because you've got some lessons to learn and you will end up in the right spot in the end. Like sometimes that's often what I say to people, but then at the same time, I would also probably say, right, don't bother with that. Don't bother with that. Don't bother with that. None of that's going to work. Even like real, very specific advice I'd say to people for sure. One, don't try and work at more than one clinic, because that's what I try to do. And that is really inefficient to do that because your head's in so many different baskets. And I do think it is, though, important for a lot of people to still get experience, even if it's just for a year working with another more experienced team or something. You will fast track your knowledge so quickly. And from a financial perspective, I would have read Profit First way faster.
Yeah, such
you
a
know,
good
the
book.
So good. Yeah. Like I actually think that should have just been our business subject, was that book and everything in it. And because I would have had my bank accounts set up ready to go for the Profit First system, but to go backwards and kind of try and figure out where your business is sitting and then try and do it all from in the heart, like, you know, midway through, it's a bit more challenging, but I did get there in the end. With that said, that's kind of fallen by the wayside lately. I need to get back into it. But yeah, Profit First, amazing. Highly recommend everyone follows that in terms of the money side of it. I think also if people are listening to this and they don't know what Profit First is, if you think about Barefoot Investor, it's a little bit like that for business. Like it gives you the exact structure, you know, what bank accounts to set up, what percentages to put into tax, superannuation, profit, you know, all that kind of stuff. And what Profit First taught me the best was actually to pay yourself.
Yeah.
Too many people are going years, and I did this, going years where all the income that was coming in for your business, because, you know, you have your other secure income, a job, so that you depend on that. And then all the money that comes in from your business, you keep reinvesting it back into the business, but then there's no end in sight. And you're like, when are you going to start paying yourself?
Yeah.
And then I was just like, every time there was like a couple of grand in the business account, I was like, oh, now I can buy an even fancier bookshelf for my office. Like, just stuff like that I absolutely did not need.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I'll buy even more liquid herbs and probably won't use them for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's like, make your business start paying you as quickly as possible, because then you will be like, oh, wow, I can actually make an income from this. And you can,
Mm.
especially with the online world, because my whole clinic's online, all 3 naturopaths are online. Um, with this kind of online platform, you can have such a low expense business. So
Mhm.
you don't need to be investing too much, and other than extra education, especially if it's into an area that you want to focus on. But even then, like when I first graduated, I was broke, really didn't have much money. And I couldn't afford all these $1,000 extra courses that everyone was doing, like not even the $200 ones, and so I had to, like, the way I upskilled was I digested every single podcast from my favorite people. I
Mhm.
would like go into my textbooks and obviously read studies and all the freebie courses, like webinars that all the pracky brands were doing. Like, that's honestly how I got a lot of my knowledge in the first couple of years. So I
Yeah.
think that's another thing. A lot of people think, oh God, it's going to cost all this extra money. And in the end, you'll be able to afford that easily. That's like,
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, don't feel like you have to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Pay yourself first.
Yes. So important.
Mm,
And in terms of growing your business, because that's something that you've done steadily over the years,
mm,
what would your tips around that be? Obviously, there's the showing up on social media and
mm,
being yourself is a huge piece, because that seems to be what's built that really engaged audience. Do you have any
mm.
other tips for people who are going down the business path and want to start really growing their audience and being
Mm.
able to make it financially viable?
Yeah, look, to be honest, you just highlighted 2 of the most important ones. Like, definitely, I know socials can feel comfortable for people, but that's a big one. I do say, unfortunately, in today's day and age, you really do have to. But then the second one that will make it easy, like you just said as well, is just show up as yourself. Don't try and like do all these weird things. Like,
Yeah.
just like literally hit record and be like, hey, so something I've never talked about before is I actually really struggle with IBS. Like, and then just tell people all that story. And then for the next 2 months, be like, so one of the key herbs that I use for my IBS is this, and this is why it works. And then you do another post, and it's like, so ever since I started treating my IBS, I now no longer get da da da. Like, you can create 3 months of content just from a personal health story. Like,
Yeah.
and again, like, you don't need to research anything for those posts because they're your personal story. Like, it's so easy. And then again, I still get in my own head about doing that myself sometimes, but then I remind myself.
Yeah.
Um, so definitely like those 2 things. And then I like reading profit first, obviously. I think
Yeah.
start paying yourself straight away. And also, I mean, obviously we do a lot of things ourselves in the beginning when we can't quite afford it, but if there's one thing you should prioritize spending a bit of money on, is getting an assistant. I tell you, your life will be just change. Like, I've had 3 VAs now, and funnily enough, they all kind of still work for me, because my first one was Steph, and now she's done my course. My second one was Emmy, and now she's one of my naturopaths.
I love that.
And then my third one was Cara, and she's still in her final year naturopathy, and she's absolutely amazing. Like, I wouldn't be able to do what I do without her. Like, even if you have someone who just simply does your emails, and I know it feels really uncomfortable, because it felt really uncomfortable for me in the beginning to get an assistant, because I was like, how am I going to show them how I do things, or how am I going to let go of that? And how it's going to be too hard to even teach them how to, like, trust me, like, most of them are just like us and know this stuff too, especially if they're naturopaths as well.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like, it's money well spent, definitely getting an assistant. And you only need to get them a few hours a week, even, like, that's all it takes to just take all that load off you, so you can show up and do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then actually one of my best pieces of advice as well is, I don't even know how to word this, but like, obviously networking is important, but build genuine relationships with everyone. Like
Mm.
that is something that I always do. I always make time for people. And it really saddens me sometimes when I've tried to reach out to like some of the more like well-known naturopaths and tried to connect with them, and they literally don't reply. And
Yeah.
that makes me feel really yuck. I'm just like, really? Are you too good for me? Like, and it doesn't take much to just be like, hey, oh yeah, really appreciate you reaching out. I'm just super busy at the moment. Like that's all it would take.
Yeah.
And I think always support each other, and eventually you'll all be sharing each other's stuff and supporting each other. Like you're never going to lose business by promoting someone else's business as well. Like
Yeah.
you can all help each other. And I'm a real feminist, and I think that us women need to support each other so much. And it's really like yucky behavior when I see women not supporting women. So yeah, I think combine all those things together. And niche in something. I know everyone says that, but eventually you'll find it. But niching all the way, definitely find something you're good at.
Yeah, so much amazing advice and like practical tips there. Thank you so much for sharing them. And I'm so with you on like the collaboration over competition, especially what you said about like not worrying about losing business to other people by sharing their content. Because again, it comes back to if you're being you and that's what people are drawn to, you're not going to lose them to someone else because they'll be attracted to you and your personality. And that doesn't mean they can't work with other people too. That's awesome when they can work with multiples. And sometimes we need to create a team so we can actually all work together and support the right people that are aligned with us. So so
absolutely.
much there. Yeah, beautiful. And before we wrap up, I'd love to talk about your podcast and your experience podcasting and how does that kind of fit into your business puzzle?
So first of all, I always, even when I would listen to podcasts as a teenager back when they were like in their early days, I'd always listen to the Hamish and Andy podcast. And I just thought I could do something like this one day. And even back from my journo days and even in high school, I always loved drama. Like I always loved talking and getting up on stage or whatever. So it always felt like a really easy thing that I could do. And I started it, I think 4 years ago, and it's definitely had some lulls where I've just like, haven't done anything for months and months, maybe even a year. At one point I had a bit of a break because, it does depend on your time management. But now I have everything set up, especially now that I've got a home office and it's just always here. So whenever something comes to me, I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do this. Like last week when me and Karen Saunders did a podcast, I messaged her like 2 hours before we even recorded it. I was like, hey, we need to do a podcast on vaginal microbiome testing. And she's like, yeah, right, let's do it. So it's good when you can just, act on a whim like that. But I think podcasting is awesome because it's just another way for you to get your message out there. And people love like we're on a podcast right now, obviously. People love the ability. It's probably the most easiest way to consume information while you're also doing something else. So it's bloody great. And I really love showing up on other people's podcasts too. Like I've never said no to anyone, I always love just chatting. I love talking. So it's easy.
I love that. Any listeners with a podcast, there you go. Reach out to Jade.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come on. Yeah, totally.
I love it. I'm the same. It's just so fun being on podcasts, like interviewing people on my podcast. Like it's the best. So that's really cool that you've kind of had that alongside you as one of your ways to grow and share information and build the community ultimately as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Beautiful. So I know we've touched on 2 books already in this conversation, but I always like to ask if you could recommend one book to every listener, what would it be and why? And it can be one of the ones you've already mentioned if you like, or you can bring a new one in.
To be honest, like I think I have mentioned 2. So definitely Profit First being like the financial part, and then probably the Big Leap is a really good one too to get you into that mindset game. I also do love Joe Dispenza stuff too. Like I've listened to him. I went to one of his weekend long things when he was in Australia once, and he's great. To be fair with you though, I have not read many books lately because being a single mum. So Yeah, so it's hard for me to read books these days, but yeah,
Yeah.
they've definitely been pivotal.
Yeah, that's some solid recommendations. Thank
Mm.
you. And do you have any like parting words of wisdom or advice for the listeners? I feel like there's already been so much, but just anything else you want to sprinkle in, or?
Honestly, just don't give a shit about what anyone says. Like, just be yourself and show up. Like, just do it. Just do it today. Like, if you've been procrastinating on like getting your Instagram set up, I dare you to go and do a post today. Like,
Yes.
and like tell the world about a secret health condition you have, or even like one little experience that you think people might be interested in. Just tell them, or tell them like, these are the supplements I take and here's why. Like, just do it. Just do it today, and then send me a DM and tell me, thanks, Jade, I've done with my first post.
Yes, I was literally just going to say tag Jade and I when you do that, because we want to celebrate you. So yeah, DM us, tag us, whatever it is. We want to like cheer you on, because it can feel scary, but it's so worth it. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. And where can the listeners follow your journey and find you in the online space?
Yeah, well, the place that has it all is Instagram. So Jade Walker Health. So my Instagram is definitely more of my endo stuff and, you know, single mum life, and well, not even so much single mum life, but just mum life in general. But then on TikTok, I've started getting on there, but really focusing on my ADHD journey. So that I could kind of keep them separate.
Cool.
So yeah, I talk a lot about my raw stuff with ADHD. And then obviously you can find other stuff at jadewalker.com.au. And even if you've got endo, or you know someone who does, definitely check out my course, the Endo Care Collective. And again, you'll just find all the links in my link in bio of my Instagram for that.
Yeah, beautiful. And I'll make sure I pop all those links in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for being here and sharing everything you've shared today. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you, and I've really enjoyed the convo. And I have no doubt the listeners will have learned so much from you.
Thank you for having me. It's actually been an awesome chat. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what people think.
Yeah.